Ladies and gents, hello and welcome to today's video. In front of me here, we've got a 2009 MacBook Pro. This is the 17-inch model. And today we're going to be talking about if this thing's worth it in 2024. We're going to go through some benchmarks. We're going to see how fast the disk is. We'll check out the Wi-Fi speeds. And then we're going to play a little Minecraft and see how this thing performs with its hardware that's 15 years old. So let's begin and see how well this thing stacks up here in 2024. Alright, first things first, let's talk about the specs of my 2009 17-inch MacBook Pro. As you guys can probably tell, this is the high-resolution anti-glare matte display. This was an additional option that you could configure in 2009 from the Apple Store when you purchased your MacBook. You might also notice that we are running macOS Big Sur. And for those of you Apple enthusiasts out there, you probably recognize that Big Sur is not natively supported on this MacBook. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Here are the specs of our computer. We've got a 2.8 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo. That's a 2-core, 2-thread processor. 8 gigabytes of DDR3 memory clocked at 1066 megahertz. And below that, we've got our NVIDIA GeForce 9600M GT graphics with 512 megabytes of graphics memory. Now, this computer does have dual graphics, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. The display tab shows our 17-inch display is 1920 by 1200, so a little bit higher resolution than 1080p. We are rocking a 256 gigabyte solid state drive. I added that myself. Of course, we've got 8 gigs of memory. Now let's head into System Report here and get a little bit more info on our computer. Here's an overview of some of the hardware specs. Down in graphics, we do have 2 graphics cards. We've got the GeForce 9400M. That is a really low power, and when I say low power, I don't mean efficient. It's just not very powerful. It still uses quite a bit of energy. And then we have the more powerful and even more power hungry 9600M GT. They're actually both dedicated GPUs, and they each have their own die on the motherboard. So there's actually 3 dies. We've got the CPU and then 2 graphics cards. Most other MacBooks with dual graphics have an integrated chip with the CPU, but the Core 2 Duo does not have integrated graphics, so we need 2 dedicated video cards here for our 17-inch MacBook Pro. In the Power tab, our battery is showing a condition of normal with 606 cycles, so that's kind of through the midway point of this computer's life. But check out the full charge capacity. When this battery was new, it could hold over 10,000 milliamp hours. That is a pretty big battery. So enough talk about specs. Let's talk about the outside of our computer, because this is really where the thing shines. Of course, we've got our beautiful 17-inch matte finish display. This is truly one of my favorite computers because of this display here. It just looks fantastic. The light reflections, I mean, this is my window there. You can see, and it is reflecting, but it's nowhere near as bad as the glossy MacBooks would have it. The bezels are actually pretty thin in comparison to computers from this time. And the display itself is actually pretty thin in comparison. If we close the laptop, it's actually a pretty beefy boy. I'll put the exact number up on the screen, how much this weighs, but this thing is pretty heavy. Down here on the right, we've got our sleep indicator light there, as well as an infrared light there. That's what the black bar is. Over here on the right, we've got our security lock and then our DVD player. I don't know the specs on that. Maybe someone can comment that down below. Flipping around here to the back, we've got the black hinge, which also doubles as a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna. Here's our bottom. We do actually have all 4 of the rubber feet, but we are missing some screws. This is actually not the matching bottom plate. This is from, I believe, a 2011 MacBook Pro. But that's all I had to make this thing work. Over here on the left side is where things get interesting. Here is our selection of ports and it is quite the selection. Starting off from left to right, we've got our MagSafe 1 port. This is the original MagSafe charger. We're now on MagSafe 3. This is the first generation. Here is our Ethernet port, followed by a FireWire port, and then 3 USB ports. Unfortunately, these are USB 2.0. Then we have a display port, or rather a mini display port. And then we have a headphone jack as well as an audio port there. And then we have this slot here. This is an Express Card 34, and that is an expansion slot. So you can actually plug in different adapters there that give you different compatibilities, such as USB 3.0 or FireWire, or you name it. This thing is actually very versatile, and it opens there. You're not going to be able to see inside, but I'll put a picture up on screen. That's what goes inside of the port there. And last but not least, we have the famous battery indicators. So we've got some LEDs here that show you how much charge your battery has. Love that feature. You can check the battery without even opening the laptop. All right, enough of the outside of this MacBook. Let's get this thing opened up. And before we talk specs, we got to go over the keyboard and trackpad. The keyboard is fantastic. It's one of the best Apple's ever made. I think it is basically on par with even the newest ones in the new MacBooks. Trackpad's a little lackluster. It's the old design. It's not a force touch trackpad, so it does actually physically click down here at the bottom. You are unable to click up here at the top, but you can do tap to click, so that's an option there. Unfortunately, the command key has seen better days, but the rest of the keyboard is very nice. It is LED backlit, and it looks really nice in the dark. All right, let's talk numbers. I went ahead and ran Geekbench 4, and I'll put those numbers up here on the screen. So here are the numbers for Geekbench 4. Keep in mind we're currently on Geekbench 6. I had to go back in time a few years to download this app, but these are the results there. I'll go ahead and throw a graph up on the screen so you can see how this thing compares to other Mac computers from the similar time era. The Core 2 Duo inside this MacBook is pretty slow, and it's very hot. It's not a very efficient processor compared to even the first gen Core i5, and the second and third gens, Core i5 and Core i7, are significantly faster. And of course, anything with an Intel Core processor is going to be faster than these Core 2 Duos. These are old CPUs, and they're not very powerful at all. I don't have a good graphics test for you guys, at least not to show a number, but we're going to play Minecraft here in a minute so you guys can check out how this thing performs. We'll go ahead and do a network speed test first, followed by a disk speed test. So we're going to see how the Wi-Fi is here on our 2009 MacBook. This has the stock Wi-Fi Bluetooth card. I do think you can upgrade those, but I have not done that. My Wi-Fi is pretty fast. I think on my iPhone I get around 300 megabits per second, so this is a little less than half of that, but still plenty fast for downloading movies or even some larger files. My upload speeds are atrocious. That's the biggest downfall to my video editing, is the length of time it takes me to upload because my upload speeds are so slow. But network's decent, and as you saw earlier, this thing does have a solid state drive. We're going to go ahead and run disk speed tests so you guys can see how fast this is. This computer came standard with a 5400 RPM hard drive, which was pretty slow. And this SSD is certainly not one of the faster ones, but the write speeds are around double that of the regular hard drive that this came with. And the read speeds are 2 to 3 times as fast. And that's going to result in a really snappy experience here, even on macOS Big Sur, which I have installed using the OpenCore Legacy Patcher. You'll find that up here. Go ahead and open that. There's a bunch of guides on how to do this, but my 2 cents on this is that Big Sur runs really well on the 2009. I tried macOS Monterey because that's one of my favorite older versions, but for some reason Wi-Fi was broken, would not connect. So I went back to Big Sur and everything seems to be working just fine. So there you have a quick look at some of the numbers. Now, what you guys have been waiting for, let's load up Minecraft. This should be the most up-to-date version here. We're going to see how our Core 2 Duo, 8 gigs of RAM, and our 9600M GT graphics card plays here for Minecraft. I'm setting my expectations pretty low, but we are going to see how this works. I'm recording this video at 4K 60 FPS, so you guys are going to see just how smooth or how stuttery Minecraft is here on this 2009 17-inch MacBook Pro. All right, before we begin, let's head into, well, first of all, let's make this full screen. And then we're going to head into options and adjust our video settings. So we'll do simulation distance 5 chunks, render distance 12 chunks. I turned the resolution down quite a bit to save us a little GPU power there. We've got our graphics on fast and everything else should be standard. So let's go ahead and load up. I'll do a creative world here and we'll just do a random seed. I don't really care. It's gonna be laggy. You can already see that the frames are pretty low here, even on the menu screen. I think this is gonna take quite a while to load, so I'm definitely gonna have to speed this up. All right, here we go. The game has just loaded. Let's take a look around. That's actually pretty smooth, but we are struggling to get chunks loaded in here. There we go. Give that Core 2 Duo a minute to get warmed up. Quite literally, this thing, you're going to hear the fans here in just a few minutes if I do too much running around. But real quick, we'll go ahead and listen to the speakers. I'm going to go ahead and turn up the sound here on the MacBook so you can see how these speakers sound. So the speakers are actually pretty good. They're not quite as good as the newer MacBooks, not even close actually, but for something this age, they are pretty decent. Here we are wandering through a village, and I'd say we're in around the 40 FPS mark. It looks a little better than 30, but it's definitely not 60. I think at 12 chunks, we should be seeing a little more than we are. Keep in mind, Minecraft is a really CPU intensive game, and this is certainly not 12 chunks. We're getting a few more loading in there. But the resolution looks really nice, and this matte finish on the display is a very nice touch. And the colors on the MacBook display here are looking pretty good as well. A little soft, not the most vibrant display. Brightness is turned all the way up for you guys. And it's really not that good in terms of loading, but the frames are actually very impressive. I thought this was going to do a little worse than it is. We should be able to catch up to the edge of the map very quickly there. You can see we are now outside the map and we just lost everything. Computer's going to try to figure itself out there. We get a few things loaded in. So you can see out in the distance, that should be the max render distance there, and obviously everything in here should be filled in as I spin around, but it is not. That is a CPU problem and nothing else. The GPU is giving us pretty good frames, and 8 gigabytes of RAM should be enough to run Minecraft pretty smoothly. So we're running into a significant bottleneck here with that Core 2 Duo. But I would say that this game is certainly playable. You could easily play this on survival mode where you're not going to be running around that quickly or flying through the air. I'd say this is a very good experience. So if you want to play Minecraft on your 2009 MacBook Pro, 15 or 17 inch, because they have dedicated graphics, I think you should be able to do that pretty decently. So enough of that. We'll go ahead and quit back to the home screen here. And I'm actually surprised. The fans have been fairly quiet as we played Minecraft there. We got a few minutes in, and I think on some of the newer Intel Macs from 2016 through, well, actually I take that back. Even 2011, once they started getting quad-core CPUs, those things got really hot. So the fact that this thing has stayed pretty cool, relatively, and quiet is a very nice touch. So is this computer worth it in 2024? I think it is. I will say that these do have a common failure where there's a capacitor that goes bad inside that prevents the computer from turning on. But if you have micro soldering skills, it's actually a super easy fix. That's what I did to this one. I picked this computer up for like 50 bucks because it was completely dead. But put in a new capacitor, this thing works flawlessly. I think if you can get OpenCore Patcher working on here and install something like Catalina or Big Sur, which is what I have, seems to be a sweet spot, you're going to have a pretty decent experience here. El Capitan is where this computer officially ends support, and I tried to use that, and it's really just not usable. Safari doesn't work. The computer kind of glitches out because it's so old. I think there's some certificates that have expired. But Big Sur has actually performed really well on this device. And I think this is a great computer for web browsing, doing emails. You could do photos on here. Obviously, you can do some light to moderate gaming, as we saw there with Minecraft. Really can't recommend video editing. Maybe if you're doing 720p or even a little bit of 1080p, you could get by doing some video editing there with Final Cut Pro. But anything above that, I would even hesitate to recommend 1080p 60 FPS. Definitely no 4K editing on this thing. You're obviously going to want a solid state drive inside of this. And if you can get the RAM to 8 gigabytes, that's a pretty sweet spot as well. Overall, really nice computer. I've been thoroughly impressed with this. And you've got a bunch of ports here on the side, 3 USB ports. And I think this is one of my favorite MacBooks of all time, especially with our gorgeous matte finish display. This computer just looks fantastic. So there you have it. That's been a somewhat comprehensive review here of the 2009 MacBook Pro 17-inch here in 2024. 15 years since this computer came out, and it still looks fantastic. Leave us some comments down below if you still use one of these, or if you're trying to find one, or have any questions or comments there about the 2009 17-inch MacBook Pro. I think this is a super cool computer, and it's been a fun project to get this thing restored to its former glory. So that's going to do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.